The keys hit the stranger's palm with a weight that didn't match the metal. Marcus Chen watched the man's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and something closer to fear. He just handed over a $240,000 Bentley Continental GT to someone wearing boots held together with duct tape. The valet was frozen mid-step. His assistant had her phone out, probably texting his lawyer. And Marcus felt more certain about this decision than he'd felt about anything in 5 years. Take it. Drive wherever you need to go. The man stared at the keys like they might explode. His name was Derek. Marcus had learned that much in the 3 minutes since finding him stranded outside the Ritz-Carlton with a crying toddler and a Honda Civic billowing smoke from under the hood. Derek's hands were shaking. "Sir, I can't just take your car. This is insane. You don't even know me." Marcus looked at the little boy clinging to Derek's leg. The kid couldn't have been more than 3, face blotchy from crying, wearing a jacket that was clean but worn thin at the elbows. Something about that jacket made Marcus's chest hurt in a way he couldn't name. "I know you're trying to get your son somewhere important," Marcus said quietly. "I know your car just died. I know you've probably been running on empty for longer than just today. And I know that right now you need help more than I need a car that mostly sits in my garage anyway." Derek's jaw worked silently. Behind him, other hotel guests were starting to notice the scene. A businessman in a Tom Ford suit slowed his walk to stare. 2 women in yoga gear had stopped pretending to check their phones. This was the kind of moment that would be on social media within minutes. Marcus Chen, tech CEO, worth $890 million according to the last Forbes estimate, handing his Bentley to a stranger who looked like he'd been sleeping in his clothes. "Your assistant is going to tackle me," Derek said, his attempt at humour cracking around the edges. "She looks ready to call the police." Marcus glanced back at Jennifer, who did indeed look like she was contemplating citizen's arrest. "She'll survive the trauma. The car's insured. You're not going to steal it. Even if you did, it's just a car." His voice dropped lower. "Your son needs you functional right now, not stranded on a sidewalk having a breakdown while you figure out how to afford a tow truck." Something in Derek's expression shattered. Just for a second, the careful mask of someone who'd been holding it together through sheer force of will cracked wide enough for Marcus to see the exhaustion underneath. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. "How did you know?" Derek's voice was barely audible. "About the breakdown part?" "'Cause I've been there," Marcus said. "Different circumstances, same feeling. Like you're one flat tire away from everything falling apart. Like you're failing at the one thing that's supposed to matter most." Derek looked at his son, then at the keys, then back at Marcus. "What's the catch? There's always a catch." "No catch. Just bring it back when you're done. Tomorrow, next week, whenever." Marcus pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card and $300 in cash. His assistant made a noise that might have been a whimper. "Here's my direct number. Call me when you want to return it. And take this for gas, food, whatever you need." Derek didn't take the money. His pride was visible, tangible, a wall built brick by brick through months or years of barely surviving. "I'm not a charity case, I know. If you were, I wouldn't be offering." This isn't pity. Marcus kept his hand extended, patient. This is just someone who has resources helping someone who needs them right now. Next month? Next year? Maybe you'll be the one helping someone else. That's how it's supposed to work. The toddler tugged on Derek's jacket. "Daddy, I'm hungry." The simple statement seemed to break something loose. Derek took the cash with hands that trembled, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his pocket like he was afraid it might disappear. "Thank you." The words came out thick, weighted with more than gratitude. "I don't know what to say. I don't know how to repay this." "You already did," Marcus said, though he couldn't have explained what he meant if someone had asked. "Just help your kid. That's the only payment required." Derek nodded, unable to speak. He scooped up his son, who immediately buried his face in his father's neck, and walked toward the Bentley like he was approaching something sacred. Marcus watched him fumble with the door, adjust the seat, sit there for a long moment, just breathing, before starting the engine. The car pulled away, smooth and silent. $200,000 of German engineering carrying a man whose entire life probably cost less than the leather interior. Marcus stood on the sidewalk watching until the Bentley disappeared into downtown traffic. His assistant appeared at his elbow. That was either the kindest thing you've ever done or the stupidest. Maybe both. Sus? Marcus didn't answer. He was thinking about the way Derek had looked at his son. That specific combination of love and fear and desperate determination. He'd seen that expression before, years ago, in a different city, on a different face. The memory was trying to surface. Something important scratching at the edges of his consciousness, but it wouldn't quite form. "Sir," Jennifer's voice pulled him back. "Do you want me to call you another car?" Marcus shook his head. "I'll walk. It's only 6 blocks." She looked at him like he'd suggested walking to the moon. "You never walk. That's why I'm starting now." He left her standing there with her phone and her concern, and started walking through a city he'd lived in for 8 years but barely seen. He passed people. Really looked at them for the first time in longer than he wanted to admit. A woman selling flowers from a cart. A teenager playing guitar for change. A family sharing a single sandwich on a bench. And he wondered how many of them were one disaster away from being Derek, standing in front of a dead car with a hungry kid and no options left. What Marcus didn't know, couldn't have known as he walked those 6 blocks back to his office, was that Derek wasn't a stranger at all. Derek pulled the Bentley into the parking lot of a McDonald's 3 miles from where Marcus had handed him the keys. His hands were still shaking. The toddler in the back seat had fallen asleep during the drive, exhausted from crying, his face still streaked with dried tears. Derek turned off the engine and sat in silence, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked like someone who'd aged 10 years in 10 months. The kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. The kind of broken that money couldn't completely repair, though right now it was doing a pretty decent job of stopping the bleeding. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen showed 17 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Debt collectors, probably. Landlord, definitely. Maybe the utility company threatening to shut off the electricity again. He silenced it without checking. The cash Marcus had given him was still folded in his jacket pocket. Derek pulled it out and counted it 3 times to make sure his exhausted brain wasn't hallucinating the numbers. $3,000. Actual money. Not promises or payment plans or temporary fixes. Just cash that could buy food and pay rent and maybe finally let him sleep for one night without panic clawing at his chest. But the Bentley. That was the part that didn't make sense. Who gives a stranger a $200,000 car? Who takes that kind of risk on someone they met 30 seconds ago, unless they're insane, or testing something, or setting up some elaborate scam Derek was too tired to see coming? His son stirred in the back seat, making small sounds that meant he'd wake up hungry any minute. Derek needed to make a decision. Keep the car and risk whatever consequences came with accepting something this valuable from a stranger. Or drive it back, return the keys, take the cash, and disappear before this turned into something complicated. Except he couldn't drive it back. He had no way to contact Marcus. No business card, no phone number, no last name. Just a memory of a man in an expensive suit who'd looked at him like he mattered. Derek's stomach twisted with something that felt like grief. Because that's what broke him. Not the money, not the car, but the fact that someone had looked at him, really seen him, and decided he was worth helping. After months of being invisible, of people crossing the street to avoid eye contact, of being treated like a problem instead of a person, one stranger had stopped and paid attention. The toddler woke up crying. "Daddy, I'm hungry. I want chicken nuggets." Derek wiped his eyes quickly, turned around to smile at his son. "Okay, buddy, let's get you some food." They went inside and Derek ordered enough food for 3 meals because he could. Because for the first time in months, he didn't have to calculate whether spending $8 on dinner meant they couldn't afford breakfast. He got the happy meal with the toy. He got himself an actual meal instead of stealing fries from his son's tray. He even got a chocolate shake because his kid had been asking for one for 6 weeks, and Derek had said no every single time. They sat in a booth by the window where Derek could see the Bentley through the glass. His son demolished chicken nuggets like he hadn't eaten in days, which wasn't far from the truth. Derek ate slowly, watching him, trying to remember what hope felt like. A woman approached their table, mid-50s, wearing a McDonald's uniform and manager name tag. She had the kind of face that had seen things. "That your car out there?" She gestured toward the Bentley. Derek hesitated. Sort of. Sort of? She raised an eyebrow, not unkind, but clearly curious. "Someone lent it to me? A stranger?" He felt ridiculous saying it out loud. The manager studied him for a long moment, taking in his worn jacket, his son's 2 small shoes, the way Derek was making one burger last as long as possible, despite being obviously starving. Must be some stranger. Yeah. Derek didn't know what else to say. She sat down across from him without asking permission. "I had a moment like that once, 20 years ago, different circumstances, same kind of impossible kindness from someone who didn't have to care. Changed my whole life." Derek looked up. "What happened?" "I was living in my car with 2 kids, working 3 jobs and still couldn't afford rent. Some lady at the church I'd been sleeping behind gave me first month's rent, security deposit, and a grocery store gift card. Wouldn't even tell me her name, just said someone had helped her once and she was passing it forward. Did you ever pay her back?" The manager smiled. "Couldn't. Never saw her again. But I've helped 7 other families since then. Different people, same kind of moment. That's how these things work. Someone pulls you up, you reach down for the next person." Derek felt something crack open in his chest. The weight he'd been carrying started to shift, just slightly, like maybe it was possible to breathe again. "Your boy looks happy," the manager said, standing up. "That's what matters. Everything else you'll figure out." She walked away before Derek could respond, disappearing into the kitchen with the casual grace of someone who delivered wisdom and didn't need acknowledgement. Derek looked at his son, who was playing with the Happy Meal toy, making engine noises and crashing it into ketchup packets, completely unaware that their entire life had just pivoted on the axis of a stranger's generosity. And that's when Derek remembered something Marcus had said, something that hadn't registered in the moment but suddenly felt significant. You already did. What had Derek done? He'd been standing there, desperate and broken, with a dead car and a hungry kid. He hadn't performed some act of heroism or demonstrated anything except need, unless that was the point, unless Marcus hadn't been testing him at all, unless this was never about what Derek deserved, but about what Marcus needed to do. The thought settled over him like warmth, like maybe kindness didn't require qualification, maybe mercy wasn't earned but given. Derek finished his burger and drove the Bentley back to Marcus's office building. His hands were steadier now, his mind clearer. The security guard waved him through without question, like Derek belonged there, like a man in a 15-year-old jacket driving a $250,000 car made perfect sense. Marcus was waiting in the lobby. "Thought you might not come back," Marcus said, but his tone suggested he'd known Derek would. "I almost didn't." Derek handed over the keys. "Thank you. For today, for the car, for believing I wouldn't just disappear." Marcus pocketed the keys without ceremony. "What are you going to do now?" "Honestly?" Derek laughed, hollow and exhausted. "I have no idea. I need to find work. Real work. Fix my car somehow. Find a place we can actually afford. Figure out how to stop my son from thinking poverty is normal. How much do you need?" The question landed like a punch. "I'm not asking for money," Derek said quickly. "I just wanted to return your car and say thank you properly." "I know you're not asking." Marcus pulled out his phone, tapped something, then looked up. "I'm offering. How much do you need to stabilize? Not to solve everything forever, just to get solid ground under your feet." Derek's throat closed. Numbers swirled in his head. Rent deposits, car repairs, groceries, his son's shoes, the electric bill he'd been dodging, the medical debt from when his ex-wife was sick, the 1,000 small disasters that poverty compounds daily. "I can't take your money." "Why not?" Because I don't know when I could pay you back. Because I'm nobody. Because this doesn't happen in real life. Marcus stepped closer. My father died when I was 12. Heart attack. No warning. We went from middle class to broke in about 6 weeks. My mother worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep us housed and fed. We were 3 days from eviction when her boss, this guy who barely knew her, paid our rent for 4 months. Wouldn't take no for an answer. Just did it. Derek waited, sensing there was more. My mother asked him why. You know what he said? Because I can. And you need it. And those two facts are enough. She cried for an hour. Then she got back up and kept fighting. Eventually we stabilized. She worked her way into management. I got scholarships, built a career. We made it. Did she ever pay him back? She tried. Marcus smiled, distant and sad. He wouldn't accept it, said help doesn't flow backward, only forward, told her to give it to someone else when she could. So she did. And when I could, I did. And now it's your turn to receive it, and someday when you're stable, it'll be your turn to pass it forward. Derek's vision blurred. I don't deserve this. Deserve has nothing to do with it. Marcus's voice was firm but not unkind. You're a father trying to protect his son. You worked until your body gave out. You took care of your dying wife instead of your career. You're drowning through no fault of your own. That's enough. The security guard at the desk was pretending not to listen, but Derek saw him wipe his eyes. $20,000, Marcus said. It's already transferred. Bank account you gave me for the direct deposit that never came through from your last job. Derek's knees almost buckled. That's too much. It's exactly enough. First and last month rent somewhere decent. Car repairs, clothes for your kid, groceries, breathing room while you find real employment. Not luxury, just stability. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll stop punishing yourself for circumstances beyond your control. Say you'll let someone help you the way that manager at McDonald's helped someone 20 years ago. Derek thought about his son, asleep in the backseat earlier, finally warm and fed. Thought about the apartment listings he'd been scrolling through, knowing he couldn't afford any of them. Thought about the terror of watching his child go hungry because Derek's body had betrayed him at the worst possible moment. Okay. The word came out broken. Okay, thank you. I'll pay it forward. I swear I will. I know. Marcus extended his hand. Now go get your son somewhere safe. They shook hands, and Derek felt something shift fundamentally in his understanding of the world. Kindness wasn't transactional. Mercy didn't require justification. Sometimes people helped simply because they could, because they'd been helped once, because the alternative was watching someone drown when you had a rope. Derek drove his son to a motel that night. Nothing fancy, but clean and warm with 2 beds and a door that locked. His son fell asleep immediately, clutching his Happy Meal toy. Finally safe. Derek sat by the window, looking at his phone, at the bank notification showing a balance he hadn't seen in years. He thought about Marcus, about the McDonald's manager, about the stranger who'd helped Marcus's mother decades ago. A chain of kindness stretching backward through time, each link forged by someone who chose mercy over indifference. He pulled up apartment listings and started making calls. By morning, he'd scheduled 3 viewings. By the end of the week, they'd have a home, not because Derek had earned it through some heroic act, but because one man had looked at another man's suffering and decided to do something about it. The world was brutal and unfair and exhausting. But sometimes, in the space between desperation and surrender, a stranger appeared with a Bentley and a belief that you were worth saving. Derek watched his son sleep and let himself believe it too. Derek sat in the quiet motel room, watching dawn break through thin curtains, and made himself a promise. Not someday when things were better, not eventually when he'd climb back to stability, but now, while he was still struggling, still afraid, still uncertain about tomorrow, he'd remember this feeling. The weight of keys pressed into desperate hands, the impossibility of kindness from a stranger, the way Marcus had looked past the duct-taped boots and saw a father instead of a failure. And when his moment came, when he had enough to share, even if it wasn't much, he'd find someone standing where he'd stood today. Someone one disaster away from complete collapse. Someone who'd forgotten that people could be good. He'd give them what Marcus gave him. Not just money or resources, but something more valuable. The knowledge that they weren't invisible, that their struggle mattered, that someone saw them and decided they were worth helping. Because that's how these things work. Someone pulls you up. You reach down for the next person. The chain continues, link by link, stranger by stranger, one impossible act of mercy at a time. His son stirred, mumbled something about pancakes, and Derek smiled. They'd get pancakes, they'd get an apartment, they'd get stable, and then they'd find someone else who needed a hand. The world was brutal and unfair and exhausting. But sometimes, in the space between desperation and surrender, it was also capable of extraordinary grace.